It's time for Breathe Again Magazine, the radio show. A moment of hope, inspiration, and solutions. Listen to real-life testimonies from women and men just like you who have gone from victim to victorious. Sit back, listen, connect in the chat room, and share the show with a friend. Here's your host, author, and motivational speaker, Nicole Cleveland.
Hello and welcome to Breathe Again Radio Show, a moment of hope, inspiration, and solutions. I am your host, Nicole Cleveland, and we share victorious testimonies from women and men just like you that have gone through the fire, come out the fire, and now they're here to share their story because we know that we're not the only ones that are going through. What we are going through, someone else has already gone through and will go through it after us. So we're here just to share our stories so someone, that next one, does not feel like they're by themselves. They don't feel like they're alone and they have no place to go and no one understands them. So I want you to sit back, relax, share the show with a friend, and just take notes, take notes because we're all going through something. We're all going through something. And you know what? If you have a victorious testimony, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to interview you. I'd love to have you on the show because guess what? Your story is not for yourself. It's for somebody else. It's for that next person that's going to cry those same tears that you cried. So contact me. Go online to breatheagainmagazine.org. You can click share your story and submit that guest submission form. We'll get back to you and get you scheduled because somebody somewhere needs to hear your story. They need hope. They need to know that they too can make it. They too are not going to, although it may feel like they're on the verge of giving up and not making it, they will make it. So share your story. Also connect with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Breathe Again, on Facebook, Breathe Again Magazine, and you can connect with me, Nicole Cleveland, on Instagram, Facebook, all over the platforms at Nicole C Online, at Nicole C Online. And guess what? Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to hang out with us. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And guess what? You're going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed today because today's show is all about choices. We think we got it together and we think we make the right choices. And there's a thin line, right? There's a thin line between them and us and the people that got caught and the people that didn't get caught. So today's show is all about choices. My guest today is Wali El Shabazz, and he is on the show today to talk about his life. He was locked up at the age of 19. He served 35 years in prison. He was faced with a life sentence at the age of 19. Just imagine that. Just pause. We go through life really fast, but just pause. 19, faced with a life sentence. Imagine that. He did it, and he's still here to tell the story. Today, he's a free man. He's in his 50s, and he's sharing his story to help that next young man, that next young girl that's out here making some bad, reckless choices. So I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome. I pay honor where honor is due. Thank you for serving your time. Thank you for doing what you had to do. And now you are no longer that same person that you once were. And so I want you to share a little bit about yourself with the audience. How would you describe Wali? Is it Wali, Wale? What is it?
Not the raffle.
Wali. Okay. Wali.
Wali means the protecting friend.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just, somebody. My mother tells me all the time that you can't help anybody, but I'm just, I just want to just live my life and be a good man. At this point, won't always like that once upon a time though.
Yeah, absolutely. You've gone through some things, right? You've gone through some things. So take me back. Um, you're 18, you're 19, you're
Mhm.
making some bad choices, right? Nowadays they
Right.
say you're wilding out. Talk to me about the person that you were.
Well, I kind of, I always consider myself, I kind of consider myself a good guy that did bad things. If that's and if that's a good description of me. Um, just I was the oldest of four kids by my mother, and trying to find my way. And I had some bad examples. All of them were in the streets, So I called myself just following their lead, And then at an early age, so it got to a point I'm looking around at some of the guys that I grew up with, I'm coming up with, and I'm seeing them with things I didn't have. So I just, made some bad choices to try to get it.
Now, were you in a gang or were you out there?
Nah, the
Okay.
gang thing, we just, it wasn't a gang thing, when I was growing up, it was just, a lot of the things that I did a lot of things solo.
Okay.
And every now and then I would do things, I would have a partner. And in this case here, I had a partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so back then, you're 18, you're 19, we all make bad choices. I often tell individuals, the difference between those of us that are out here and those of us that are on the inside are really, we make bad choices, but they just got caught, right? It's a lot of
Right.
people that did a lot of things and they just didn't get caught. So you were faced with a life sentence at the age of 19. Did you just pause and just say, my life was over? Did you have any hopes of ever getting out?
Well, when I was sentenced, right, the judge decided to run it up. The first thing, he sentenced my co-defendant first, and he started to run it off the time. Then he got to me, 20 years, 20
Mm.
years, 5 years, 2 years, and then they said life.
Mm.
And my family was in the courtroom, and I was like, I'm crying at this particular point. It's just that shock had just hit me. So we go back to the side to the holding tank, and I just asked the question, just general, and I said, man, what just happened? And he was like, quote of his man just gave us life in 47 things.
My God.
And they were like, I think we saw a couple of days later, my lawyer came with, and that's something else a lot of people have to understand. Black kids today, it's the same as black kids back during that time. And I had a court-appointed attorney. He didn't put forth no effort to try to do anything to assist me. Only thing it was, I was wrong. I mean, I'm like the guy I'm like Red from Shawshank Redemption, the only guilty man in there. So it was no thing. It was one of them things that I accepted responsibilities on that from the start. But I never thought I was going to be be hit with that type of sentence.
Right, and I will say that the charge was a burglary charge. Is that correct?
Burglary while armed with a deadly weapon. That's something that we didn't, you don't know. That's what the thing about what young kids don't know. They don't know some of the things that they're doing and what they're up against.
Mm-hmm.
And you got one other strike, against you, as a black child, and coming up too.
You're right. And when we spoke earlier, and you told me that it was burglary with a deadly weapon.
Right.
Right. But a life sentence plus 47 years. And it is because, you did not have any representation, right? And black and brown, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Talk to me about going in. Like, they say you are supposed to be, it's a rehabilitation, right? You're really rehabilitating the child that's going in or the young man that's going in for them to do better. Did you see any of that?
Early on, they say rehabilitation, but it really was mostly punishment.
Right.
There's a difference between, rehabilitation and punishment. The rehabilitation thing didn't come till later. And mind you now, I turned 20, I was 19, I turned 20 years old in the jail. And I spent 9 months in jail. I left jail, went to receiving center, where it's a processing part when you first get your time. Then you go through this process of them sending you to whatever institution that they're going to send you to. Now, I was 20 years old and went to the old state penitentiary in Richmond, Virginia. And it was known as the Wall, where they used to do the state executions at. Until it's tore down now. It's long gone. Now, at that time, at 20 years old, I was the youngest on the compound.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Were you scared?
I'm not going to say I was scared, but there was a jitter. I had them jitters, them butterflies and everything was there, right? And when it just so happened, when I got there, they used to put you in the basement for orientation, and then the next day you went on the yard. I went upstairs to the building. I went to I had to go to this room off in the back in one cell block to get a bed. So I'm sitting on a table, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I'm like, don't nobody know me, but come to find out, it was somebody it was one person there that I knew. And that kind of, eased it a little bit.
It helped. Yeah,
right.
It helped. In our previous conversation, you did tell me that you went in and you still was trying to be hard, right? You still was a little knucklehead.
That came hard. That came a little later, right? I mean, early on, I didn't handle this thing. I didn't handle doing time well, right? It was that, it was like, You hear the thing, if a God came at you, you had to be a certain way, had this rebelliousness in me, and then I was still angry as well.
Right.
Man, they just gave me life in 47 years. I was
yeah.
I was still
man, I'd be angry too. I'd be angry too. But at some point it had to humble you. And where was that breaking point for you? Where did you sit down, look in the mirror, and say, I got to work on me. I got to get me together? Because although you got a life sentence, you're here. Glory be to God. You are here and you are out and you are free, right? And so you didn't throw it all away. You had to do some type of turnaround. When did that take place?
Well, I think the very first, it was 1985, the end of 1985, right? When I got to Spring Street, when I arrived at Spring Street, I immediately started going to school. Mind now, I'm still going through what I'm going through, but there was one thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to get my GED.
Okay.
Right. And I remember to this day, I still remember this day that it was October of 1985 when I received the GED diploma. I ended up taking the test again because I took it the first time and I had my social security numbers backwards. Oh. So they were like, this couldn't be you because this is a woman in Richmond. I know this is not you. So we got to get everything. We need some verification. I said, all right. I just take the test over. But while I was waiting on the second test, the first test came back and they corrected the social security number. And when I received it, the first person that I called home, I called my grandmother. and there was just sense, a joy just to hit me because it was the very first thing that I had accomplished, and that I actually completed outside of sports and everything that I was into growing up. It was when I received that GED at that moment, it was just a joy just hit me. So I just, I called my grandmother and she was happy for me and everything. We was, and I just went on back. But I went through a process, I got transferred, and then I go to another institution. At that time it was Nottoway Correctional Center, and they was on the rules real hard. Okay. Now Spring Street, it was like a free fall. You just did, and I mean, and mind you, now it was some horrific stuff that was going on in there. Stabbings. I actually in there, I witnessed, standing in front of my cell, a stabbing right in front of my cell.
My Lord.
And then I get transferred to another institution that's really into the rules. I didn't adjust too well for that during that period. I was there approximately 3.5 years, and in 3.5 years I received some 52 infractions.
Wow.
I stayed. I don't think I did, in the 3.5 years that I was there, I don't think I did a straight 4 months where I wasn't in isolation.
My gosh. Ooh, wow.
And I was going through it, and I think it triggered and I'm back there catching charges. I'm just going through things. I'm back here just going through it. I'm cussing police out, officers out, and going to the showers and with handcuffs on, and there was an incident that happened one time where I'm going so hard at this officer, and I still remember him right now today. But I ended up going back to Nottoway years later and apologized to him because I was going so hard. That was after I had got my head together. But at that time, people actually thought I was suicidal. Wow. Because I have handcuffs on, going to the shower with shower shoes on, with boxer shorts and no shirt. That's how you had to go to or a t-shirt. That's how you had to go to the shower.
Okay. And
I'm cussing this man out in his face, up in his face. And as I'm cussing him out, I'm spitting in his face at the same time. And when I got through saying all that I wanted, they were I'm just going through it. And after I finished doing what I was doing at that moment, I turned around and walked away, going down some stairs. And I used to think back on that, and I said, well, me and my temperament, at one time, I could not have done to me what I did to that man at that moment, because at that moment, I probably would have kicked me down the stairs. And whatever had happened would have happened. I was sharing that with an older brother once. He said, man, you were suicidal. I say, I might have been. It was just
didn't care. You didn't care at that point.
Right.
Yeah. And you didn't care.
I was writing a friend of mine that I grew up with, named was Deborah Brown, Reverend Deborah Brown now. And
I know Deborah, that's my buddy.
Yeah, we went live at a high school together. We grew up in Hunterville Village together.
Okay.
And I was sharing with her, I was writing her one time and said to her, and was telling her what was going on. These people always coming at me. They always want me to stand for count. I don't understand why they want me to stand for count and all so on, so on, so on. So she said, the reason why they do what they do to you is because they know how to get a reaction out of you. This isn't a letter that she's saying to me. She said, just stand. Right? So
praise God.
I changed something up. They came in one time, so I started standing for count. I started standing for count. I stopped arguing with them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they were because I had done it so much, they were so used to it, that threw them off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It threw them off. They were like, something wrong with him. I don't know what is going on. So they kept watching me all. They kept coming past the sale, checking on me. And then I got transferred.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I was up under some brothers in the Nation of Islam with a study group, self-improvement courses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when it actually, certain things started to change.
That's when it clicked for you?
Yeah.
Awesome. So what do you think that time frame was from 1985 to 1990?
From 85 to 92.
92. So it took about 7 years for it to click.
Mm-hmm.
But you turned around. So talk to me, Wale, right? Wale.
Wali.
I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get it right before the show. I'm gonna get it right before the show is over. So look, I really want to talk about the love of a mother, and I'd love to have your mother on the show at a later time. But your mother stood by you, right? She did not commend the wrongs that you were doing, but she stood by you in love, right? She loved you throughout the years. Talk to me about that. And how did it feel? Because there's, as you know, there's so many people that are incarcerated that don't have support. There's nobody there for them. Talk to me about the importance of your mother being there and a support system.
Well, Mom was there from day one. I mean, she shared some things with me. She told me, she said, it was, I used to call her my other aunt, Donita. It was her father that told her when they sentenced me. He told her, she said, you got to do it with him. You know, and she did it with me, you know. Yeah. And I think one of my greatest fears, two of my greatest fears, that was dying in prison and not allowing my mother to see me walk out that gate.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that didn't happen because she saw you walk out that gate.
Yeah, she shut the top right down. It was it was on a Friday, July 27, 2018. We walked. I walked. It was two other guys that came out with me. He got to speaking in tongues. They stopped right there. Their family, they hadn't even hugged their family yet. They stopped. Let her finish doing what she was doing, hugging me and everything. When she got through, then they went to their family.
My. Very important, right? To have a support system.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone that's making the choices that you made back in the 80s? As a teenager, 17, 18, 19, just doing reckless things, just not even thinking, just being very impulsive. What would you tell that young man or that young girl if you had them in front of you?
Stop being selfish. And see, you know, I share this. I used to share this with a lot of the younger guys inside before I came home. And I used to say, yo, man, we were selfish. They were like, what you mean? What do you mean, Shabazz? I say, we were selfish. Think about the things that you were doing out there. You say, well, I was doing what I do. I was taking care of my family. I say, well, okay, let's look at that. You taking care of your family. You in here now, right? Who's taking care of your family now? I say the thing is that what the selfish part of it is that you're not really like thinking about the consequences of how it's going to affect. It's not just affecting you; it's also affecting those that you say you love.
That's right.
You know, so in reality, you were selfish. We were selfish. You know, so you know if we can get that point across to them, and to them, and at the same time try to give them a glimpse for what I know now, a glimpse of, because see, honestly, anybody can go in prison and survive. Most guys that go in, most people that go into prison, they can survive the physical part.
Okay.
It is the mental aspects of it that breaks a lot of people down.
Explain that. What do you mean by the mental part? How does that break you down?
Well, it's that form of that control, right? And it's this constant control. You don't have no power. You're told to do everything. When to get up, when to wake up, when to go in, lights out, when to go eat. In some situations, when to go take a shower, when to in some cases it was when to use the bathroom, because I've been in situations where where things got so bad with the power in the institutions where they was controlling the when you could go and flush the toilet.
Wow, my goodness.
And I'm in communication with a young sister that's on the I call her my first female mentee, and she's on a woman's farm. And one of the things we had this thing for a long time. We had this thing that the women they have it easier than us during time. That reality was that that their thought was shattered because this younger, she's 28 years old, and she deals with a frustration regularly. And I understand where you're coming from now. Where women are carried in those institutions, and you have staff that has to, that comes in and they frustrated, they overwork, they understaffed inside the institutions as well. So so you have to be able, if you're not wise enough, you allow yourself to get drawn into certain things. And it took me a while, to understand that. And I had to understand, okay, they have lives too. And I used to have to explain that to some of the younger prisoners, though, right there, yo, man, they have, they got problems too. Just because they come in here, they got a job, it's a job to them. And a lot of times, they get burnt out.
Right.
By the politics of prison.
Right. What could have helped change the choices you made when you were making those choices? If you had to speak to your former self, what would you tell that individual? Like, what did you need not to go down that path?
A stronger male figure in the house. My mom raised us by herself.
Yeah. And
it's a sad reality, though. And I think a lot of fathers, bear the brunt of certain things, a lot of situations. And I grew up with guys that had, and I was talking to one yesterday, and I remember something that he used to do. He said, "Man, you still remember this?" Yeah. He would we was like 13 or 14 years old. And at a certain time at night, he's just disappear on us. And finally, he told us what it was. He had a certain time he had to be in the house. His father lived in the house with him. He was one of the few guys in my neighborhood that had a live-in father. So a lot of it, it contributes to the fact, though, right now having a male figure, a strong male figure in the house.
Not having that authority figure.
Right. But by the time my mother had got married again to my stepfather Julius Brown, I mean, I was already at that point.
He was out there already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a good man in his own right. You see what I'm saying? He was a good dude in his own right. He had his issues, but he loved my mother.
Sure. And you was already down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah. What advice would you give to mothers of children mirroring your past behavior? What can you tell us as women? What could we be doing? let's say, for instance, you have a group of mothers that don't have a father figure for their children, and their child is going down the wrong path. What advice, as someone that's going through it, what would you tell that woman?
Listen to your child. You know, because a lot of time now, I think back on a lot of things that me growing up, right? And my mother did her best.
Yeah. And shout out to Reverend Brown. Love her. She is amazing. You know, and we love her, and I know that you love her. And you know, this is just your story. It is your testimony. Right.
I mean, she did her best. I hold a lot of things, but it's just, you know, there were you know, mothers, you know, parents make mistakes too sometimes.
We all do. Absolutely.
You know,
we don't have a book to read.
Right,
we don't have a course to go through.
Right. I just, you know, maybe at some point, I think there were some things though, right, that she may have missed because she was too busy raising 3 other kids.
Absolutely.
You know, she tried her best, right? You know, but like I said, just listen. You know, she had, you know, she had a way that she had a pattern that where she wanted me to go. You know, but I was on my own pattern. Yeah, but a lot of times, and one of the things that I've experienced with some of the guys, you know, some of the guys that I have talked to over the years is that, you know, they say that their parents didn't listen to them. Yeah. They didn't hear them. Mm-hmm. You know, they just so when they felt like that and they felt like they were by themselves, they just went into their shells. They just retreated into doing what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. So what's on the horizon for you? What's next for you? You know, you got the whole world ahead of you, and you have so much that you have to do, because I believe that we go through to come out to share and help somebody else. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. But what's on the horizon for you? What do you want to do?
Well, actually, since I've been home, I've been back, you know, to this COVID thing hit. I've been back. I have been going back into the prison, speaking to guys as far as reentry and what.
Wonderful.
Right. And I'm still like in communication with a lot of guys. You know, they call, you know, they would call me. I tell them, they say, well, such want to know. I said, well, just give me my number. Right. Mm-hmm. So they would call, and I give them the best guidance that I can give as far as give them, you know, talk to them, share my experience since I've been home. You see them, you know, and with the hopes that when some of them get their opportunity to come, the transition won't be as hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying my transition was hard. It was made relatively easy to some degree, you know.
Really, when you came home?
With a transition, because things were like set up as it relates to it. Sometimes, you know, I think the hardest thing for me, and like I told some of the guys inside, was I said some of your greatest battles is not going to be, you know, with not necessarily finding a job, you know, and things like that, right? Some of your greatest battles are going to be with just members of your own family. Mm. Because you know, you have to remember, especially if you've done over as much time that I had done, yeah. And you know, and see, they are trying to get to know you, or they should be trying to get to know you, and you're trying to get to know them. Sure. Y'all are pretty much still strangers, so it's gonna be a slight little battle, right? The battle is like you're gonna feel. I was feeling as though that I was back under control again. Mm-hmm. You know, when somebody would try to tell me what I should be doing, as opposed to suggesting what I should be doing.
Interesting. So how they spoke to you was sort of like a trigger of being back inside as well.
I felt like I was being talked down to at some point. There were those moments where I felt as though I was being spoken down to, you know, and I got into some arguments with some family members, you know, but I do know for the most part that where they come from, they were coming from, there was love. Sure. I knew that it was no doubt. I just, you know, it was those times. I wish you didn't love me this hard. You know? But right. It's like, you know, it was like forcing. You know, it's this thing though, right? You know, I think sometimes they make the mistake of thinking they was making the mistake of thinking that, that although I hadn't been out here, but at the same time I have lived as well. You know. I was living, maybe not to this degree. I was living in a small city. That's pretty much how we used to look at, you know, those institutions, right? Where they were like small cities. You know,
I never thought of it like that.
The warden was the mayor. You know, you had the warden was the mayor. The assistant warden was the vice mayor. The operations officer was the business manager was the city manager. You know, everybody. The major was the chief of police.
Oh,
wow. That's how we used to look at it sometimes. So they were like small cities, but it's the one institution. It is one of the very few institutions that you get a whole lot of people, but it's one of the very few institutions that you're going to be in that you're going to be forced. You're forced to deal with at least 62 different individuals inside of the first 5 minutes that you wake up in the morning.
Wow. Well, you know what? I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. If the listeners would like for you to come out and speak, or if they would like for you to be on their podcast or their radio show, how would they contact you?
Just contact me, Wali El Shabazz at gmail.com.
All right, now you have to spell that for folks now. You just can't be
WALIELSHABAZZ at gmail.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any last words, Wali?
Well, just everybody just, you know, just love yourself, you know, and appreciate this life that God has given us, you know, and don't take this thing for granted, you know, because there's a realization, there's a statement that there's something that was guys ask me this every time I talk to them. They ask me, say, how did it make you feel when you came? That's surreal.
Surreal.
You know, brother told me, he said, look, go save the world. So I'm just doing my part. I'm just trying to do my part right now.
Awesome. And we will leave on that note. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being transparent and sharing your story, because I believe you're going to help that next young woman or that next young man and that mother that's struggling. So keep doing what you're doing. And you know what? The doors are going to open for you. I know they are. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.